A very close match. Old Kepler data points to the most Earth-like solar system yet. Another fast radio burst shows off its repeating pattern. And 3 rocket launches in 3 countries over 24 hours. The busy weekend in low Earth orbit. It's Saturday, June 20, 2020. That's a lot of 20s. Good morning, I'm Matt Miller. This is Talkin Science Uncut, produced live. Let's get into it.
Across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts and YouTube, this is Talking Science with Dr. Brad Tucker and Matt Miller.
And it is a very good morning to Dr. Brad Tucker. Happy Tuesday to you, Brad, for another week of Talking Science.
That's right. We're just a few days off. In fact, the solstice, it's amazing to figure out we're astronomically halfway through the year. It's shocking.
It's been a very, very long year.
Yeah, very long. And yeah.
There's not much else to say. I think we all...
There's not much else to say.
I saw a good meme on the weekend that was, let's just put the Christmas tree up and get the year over and done with straight away.
Yeah, look, I think most people would just go for that. Be like, yep, all right, that's it.
And Christmas in July isn't that far-fetched of an idea.
No, it really isn't, especially here, in the Southern Hemisphere, we're getting into our cold weather. Gets you in the right spirits.
It absolutely does. Well, of course, you can find Brad on social media, Facebook, Dr. Brad Tucker, Twitter, @BTucker22. Trekzone's all over social as well. Just search for Trekzone. Brad, let us dive into the headlines of the week.
Talking Science headlines.
And first up, Brad, the Solar Parker probe is about to take its 5th trip around the sun.
Yeah, it's been going quite remarkably. It's making its 3rd trip, what we call flyby from Venus. So every time it goes near Venus to actually gain speed so it can get closer to the sun. This one it's doing on its way out so it can slingshot back in. And it's so far turning very successful. And I think we'll see hopefully a big data release later this year of all the cool discoveries it's made recently.
Speaking of data discoveries, the first interstellar parallax with New Horizons has taken place, and this is really fascinating. On the YouTube version of the show, I've got these comparisons of Earth-based observations and New Horizons-based observations. What's happening here, Brad?
So parallax is one of the most accurate ways we can measure distance. This is one of the things I work on all the time. We usually use parallax for measuring, the distances and sizes of things. And the way we often do parallax is you take an image, say in January, and then you wait 6 months and take another image in July. Well, that's because the Earth moves. We know the distance between the Earth and the Sun pretty well, 149,600,000 kilometers. So if you know that distance really well, we can actually use trigonometry. Yes, folks, we do use trigonometry. And then you can measure the distance. So, you could do this experiment at home. Hold your finger out and blink your eye. Well, your finger will move differently to the things in the background. And if you know how far apart your eyes are, you can use trigonometry to figure out how far that star is. Well, this idea was, we don't have to wait. We have something just super far away, and we know the distance to it. So if we take an image at the same time, it's like looking through our left eye and looking through our right eye separately to figuring out how far away it is. So a really cool technique that, while it doesn't improve the accuracy of everything, was a great demonstration that, hey, this is actually possible and really cool.
One last headline. We're going to throw this in here because it's some very cool video of a meteorite burning up over Karratha in Western Australia yesterday morning.
Yeah, and I think some people who had alien invasion on their 2020 bingo card thought they were about to check it off, because it's really remarkable footage, as you're seeing. A really bright meteor. And this is even a different meteor. If you notice, it's a little bit slow moving. Usually more meteors are faster, and it's slower, more akin to space junk, but it's not space junk. It's not the color. It's not flaming, breaking apart. This appears to be an Earth skimming meteor. So one that kind of just goes over the top. It doesn't actually fully enter the Earth's atmosphere and keeps going out into space. So there was no sonic boom. There doesn't appear to be any landing at this point. So kind of a remarkable sight that would have really surprised people if you're looking up in the Pilbara the other night.
Well, the power of social media to get those images back to us. It's incredible to think that there are quite a few people in the Pilbara of Western Australia with smartphones at the ready at about 1 a.m. in the morning, including the Karratha Police on burglary patrol, no less. It's absolutely fantastic. Well, welcome back to Trekzone Live. This is Talkin Science Uncut, produced live here on a Saturday morning across Trekzone's socials on YouTube, Facebook Live, and Periscope/Twitter. It's great to have your company. Thanks for being here, whether you're watching us live or on replay. However you do it is really appreciated. And another appreciation, my esteemed appreciation, goes to Dr. Brad Tucker for beaming in to my Zoom recording every Tuesday morning with 3 stories of the week and a couple of headlines. He does it because he loves talking about science and space news. And with Talkin Science now just over a year old, or probably coming up to 18 months now, it's something that I'm really, really enjoying, and it's fantastic to see the feedback on the show, which is absolutely incredible. Don't forget that you can get in touch with me. I'm the one-man band of Trekzone. Tweet at me, leave a comment on Facebook, or leave a comment here on YouTube. I'll read them all, and I'll reply to them all, as long as you're nice enough about stuff. Don't forget to give me a like on YouTube, all that sort of stuff. It just promotes me into the YouTube algorithm. I mean, we're doing 6 shows a week by myself with some fantastic guest appearances, guest interviews, and YouTube is... we're just keeping us down the bottom of the pile. So spread the word, spread the love of Trekzone. That would be absolutely appreciated. Alrighty, well, let's get into the first of the stories of the week. And astronomers have patiently watched a fast radio burst for over half a year and discovered a pattern. It's a story of the week from Talkin Science.
Talking Science, stories of the week.
Brad, let's dive into the stories of the week. The most similar star and planet system or a solar system has been discovered. I believe that we still need to confirm this one, but it's looking very, very promising.
Yeah, and when we say similar, what we're talking about here is both the star, the sun, and the planet are very similar to our own, because that's one of the things that we're often looking for. We find lots of planets around other stars. And sometimes they're very similar in size and mass to Earth. But often, as we talked about last week, they orbit red dwarfs or other stars. So the Goldilocks zone, the zone where their water could exist, the heating, the potentially atmosphere is very different. This planetary system seems to have a lot of remarkable similarities to our sun and our Earth, which means that it's a great chance with the combination to think about, habitability and environments and those sorts of things, because there's a lot of emphasis nowadays on not just the planet, but the entire system as well. And so it's kind of a really unique discovery.
It is, of course, as I said, is still a planet candidate is the technical term until further confirmation's made that this is an actual exoplanet. But as you say, it's an Earth-like world. It's about 1.9 times the size of our planet.
Yeah, that's right. So, it's bigger, but not dramatically big. We know from what we calculate anywhere between 0.6 to 2.5 times the mass of the Earth will mean the planet is similar to Earth. We could look at our own solar system. In fact, Venus is pretty much the same size as Earth. And we think, well, why now it's not like Earth? Probably was in the past. We look at Mars. Mars is substantially smaller than Earth. But again, we think Mars was like Earth at some point in the past. And we think even planets bigger than that. We do think there is an upper limit, though, that when you start to get into what we call the super Earths, things 2.5 to 4 times the size of the Earth, the way the ground, the rocky bit in the atmosphere works, becomes very different than planets like Earth. So what that means for habitability and environments and those sorts of things, we're not quite sure. But in this case, it's similar enough that definitely puts it in the Earth-like range.
And the star that it is orbiting is Kepler 160. We've already confirmed that it has 2 planets orbiting in that system. This new study has revealed 2 additional ones.
Because of the way it is, I think it is a G-type star. So our sun is a G3 type star. It's a smaller G-type star, which means it has in terms of radiation to the planet, It's about 93% Earth, so it's about 93% the heat and the daylight and those sorts of things that we get here on Earth, which is, again, pretty much the same. And what we're starting to find is it's very remarkable that you get multiple planet systems. When Kepler started, it was really just under the idea that, hey, let's just see how many planets there are. And, what are there? And then they started to find more and more and more. And then a lot of these turn out to be multiple planet systems that, having multiple planets around a star is way more the norm than the exception, which is, it's a really exciting thing when we think about. Now, obviously, as you said, this needs to be confirmed. And it's always just quick to note why we talk about confirmation. In order to be a confirmed planet, we have to have 3 clear orbits, 3 clear rotations, 3 clear years. Now, if you want to find something similar to Earth, you need to wait 3 times 365 days, 3 years. So you have to wait quite a while to see those 3 transits. That's often why we find a lot of planets, like we talked about last week, that have 17-day years. It's easy to see those lots of times and realize they're real.
And one last thing with this story, Brad, is that astronomers are re-examining archive data from the Kepler Space Telescope, as you've been talking about. NASA retired that in October 2018. So it just goes to show that it was just gathering so much data, more data than astronomers could process in real time.
That's right. And as I've talked about, we use Kepler for finding supernova and things that go bump in the night. And we have a backlog of over 50 objects we're still getting through because there's just so much data, as you said. And that's one of the exciting things about the way we view astronomy and data is that it's very open source because we realize no one person or group can do everything. And there's just so many things out there, and new techniques are developed by allowing it to be open access and open policy. We actually get a lot more science than hoarding onto it.
The patience that must go into that is absolutely incredible. I don't know whether I could sit around for half a year waiting for these microscopic millisecond bursts of radio static to come through. It just really goes to show the patience and the perseverance of astronomers doing their research thing, which also includes Dr. Brad Tucker. He does the researching thing as well, using archive data and fresh data as well, which is really, really cool. And one of the sites that is helping to do that research is the Parkes Radio Telescope, in conjunction with the Tidbinbilla Tracking Station, part of NASA's Deep Space Network. On Monday, Glenn Nagel from the Tidbinbilla Tracking Station joined me for a chat about the makeover of the largest parabolic dish in the Southern Hemisphere. At over 70 metres in diameter, Deep Space 43 has been running for 40 years, and it's time for a makeover. It's getting that. It's taking about 12 months. Glenn had a chat about that on Monday's show. That was episode number 381. For those of you playing at home, jump over and have a listen to that one. Have a listen to Glenn and I chatting about Deep Space 43. After we finish this live stream, of course, because another story of the week is up now, and it's so close to being a duplicate Earth-Sun combo. So close, but just a little far. This planet candidate and its companion star are certainly raising some eyebrows, and Dr. Brad Tucker and I are chatting about it in this Talkin Science Story of the Week.
Talking Science Stories of the Week.
And Brad, another fast radio burst. It seems that stories of the week happen on Talking Science in threes. This is our second chat about fast radio burst. What's happening?
Yeah, look, fast radio bursts are all the rave, so to speak, nowadays. And that's partially just because, now that we know they're an interesting thing, there's a lot of look and research going into finding them. There appears to be another set that do very distinct repeating. So this one appears to have essentially a cycle of 157 days. So for about 90 days, it's active and going pew, pew, or whatever it sounds like. And then it's quiet for 67 days. And then it repeats that. And things that do these repeats in clear orbits and clear cycles gives very big clues as to what it could be.
And we talked about this last week, that they last for just a millisecond. And your comparison was to put a needle in a haystack on Earth and go to Mars and try and find it. So to find this another one in a repeating pattern is quite remarkable, really.
Not only do you have to first find it, but then you have to stay on it once you think you know the location. Make sure you tune it into the right frequency, and then just wait to monitor this period to see if you detect it. And if it's a 157-day period, kind of like we were talking about with the Exoplanet, you have to wait that long to see the period. You can't take a shortcut. You can't cut that time down. You just have to wait. And it's important to wait, which is I'm glad they've done in this case of this FRB. But otherwise, you miss this valuable information, which gives us really big insight into what it could be and definitely what we think it could not be.
I'm just trying to think of the timeline here to discover that it's repeating on such a large time frame. This FRB was first discovered in 2012 and then was seen repeating in 2016. So what sort of goes into, deciding that we're going to wait 160 or half a year to see if this thing repeats? Are there clues?
Usually not. Usually it's luck. And this is kind of the amazing thing. It's luck and dedication. You detect it in 2012, and then they saw with the, this is the second repeating one. When with the first discovery of the repeating one, people started to think, oh, maybe some of these do go off. So programs were enacted. So people had to schedule telescope time and look at it to see did any of these repeat. Now, most of them have not. So you point at a telescope or you take a telescope and point it at it and you hear nothing. So this very well could have turned out to be nothing as well. Or they could have been observing it not during the cycle period, right? If it has 60 days of inactivity, you could have just always chosen that 60 days of inactivity and never seen the repeatingness and never seen the extra outbursts. So it's a bit of luck, it's a bit of scheduling, and then a lot of it is just dedication and monitoring lots of these things and hoping one of them does what you think it does.
Now, one of the radio telescopes that is aiding in this research is the Parkes radio telescope from the CSIRO, and also the Tidbinbilla tracking station as well. Not only do they talk to spacecraft, but they're helping out in some of this research as well.
Yeah, the first FRB was discovered with the Parkes radio telescope, and lots of telescopes have been dedicated to doing this. And one of the things people fail to realize about the Deep Space Network is there is a little bit of time allocated for people to do astronomical research as well. And one of the popular ones is to do what we call VLBI, very long base rate interferometry. And that is essentially if you have lots of dishes separated far out, you can improve your resolution by seeing it kind of from multiple angles or having a wider baseline. And so it allows us to see things clearer and pinpoint the location clearer. It doesn't allow us to see further necessarily, but we kind of get a better, clearer vision of it. And for pinpointing, say, the locations or the sensitivity of the repeating, it's a very useful instrument to be able to have. And
I did just want to mention that Tidbinbilla is part of this as a bit of a shameless plug for my chat on Monday with Glenn Nagel from the Tidbinbilla tracking station, the Canberra Deep Space tracking station, as part of the NASA's Deep Space Network. Deep Space 43 is getting a makeover, and the link is in the video description here on YouTube and, of course, on Trekzone for my chat with Glenn. Very fascinating, and it's fun to have him on the show talking about all these radio telescopes that are doing so much and learning that they are doing astronomy as well.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the remarkable things to be and assets to be able to have. And Australia, with just so many different radio telescopes, is able to push the bounds on these sorts of exciting things, which definitely allows us just ways of seeing the universe that we didn't have previously.
Now that is a really cool discovery, and we're waiting for confirmation of that one. Hopefully that comes through soon and we can really call this an exoplanet and give it the recognition that it deserves. Well, don't forget Trekzone's all over social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, YouTube. Did I mention that? We're there. We're Trekzone, Trekzone.org. Just search for Trekzone on any social media platform. You'll find us, just like you'll find us on any podcasting platform as well. Just search for Trekzone or a Trekzone Conversation and we'll come up. Subscribe and leave a 5-star review. or 4 or 3 if you want to. That just helps promote us in those catalogues as well. It's all about word of mouth for Trekzone. We're producing shows 6 days a week, and it'd be fantastic if you could help me spread the word, spread the love of Trekzone. Let your friends know, tweet about us, post about us, comment to us. Let's have a conversation about all this science and space news that I'm bringing to you every week with Dr. Brad Tucker's help. And speaking of Brad, he's on social media as well. On Facebook, Dr. Brad Tucker. On Twitter, btucker22. Engage with him, follow him as well to get the latest science and space news as well. But what a busy weekend last weekend was for low Earth orbit. It's our final Talkin Science story of the week. There were 3 rocket launches from 3 countries across a 24-hour period, which is just absolutely incredible and such a busy time to be low Earth orbit, to personify low Earth orbit. Dr. Brad Tucker and I are discussing it in this final Talkin Science story of the week for this week.
Talking Science, Stories of the Week.
And Brad, our final story of the week is about a busy weekend that has just rolled past. SpaceX, Rocket Lab and Japan all launched rockets in 3 separate countries last weekend. A very busy time to be getting up into low Earth orbit.
A very busy 24 hours. And I think kind of the remarkable thing is, I'm pretty sure this is the first time we've had 3 different launches within 24 hours, but definitely 3 different companies launching within 24 hours. All 3 of these were private companies doing their launches, which just goes to show how fast the industry has moved. And I think that the important or one of the more notable things about the Rocket Lab's launch was this was one that was actually delayed due to coronavirus and was scheduled to launch late April, as we covered about what some of the delays were. But now that things are reopening New Zealand, they were able to redo it. But of course, they had a weather delay on Thursday, so they had to wait.
Always the weather delay.
But it also meant that because of the weather delay, they all happen in the same 24-hour period. So, that's exciting. So there was a little bit of a benefit to this.
The silver lining. Well, the brilliant thing with the Rocket Lab's launch, and we'll talk about the other guys in a second, but Rocket Labs were carrying 5 small satellites for the US National Reconnaissance Office, NASA, and here at home, the University of South Wales had some payloads on this craft.
That's right. So M2 is a Pathfinder satellite. It was for the Australian Air Force. So UNSW Canberra built it, and then they took it to us at Mount Stromlo because we do all of the satellite testing and ready for space. And then after it was launched, there's a company in just north of Canberra called Singular Space that is built as a private ground tracking company that's doing all the data relaying and acquisitioning and tracking for it. So it's kind of, for us in Australia, it's important. It's the first time a city, different groups in a city, essentially have done every part of the satellite, from design to building to testing to ready for space, then operating in space. So it's a really remarkable step in how fast the industry is moving here in Australia.
And onto SpaceX's launch, they've put another 58 Starlink satellites into orbit, but not just them on board this Falcon 9 rocket.
No, that's right. For the first time on a Starlink launch, they did some ride sharing. And ride sharing is exactly as it sounds, and it happens way more often than people imagine. And that is, you build a rocket, you put a bunch of stuff in it, and then you have room, and you kind of operate it like eBay. And you say, hey, who wants to get a lift into space? And then people bid money, and eventually you settle on a price and you FedEx your satellite to the launch pad. It's literally as simple as that. And it's all about cost. If you can take extra things into space, you're going to do that. You get a little bit of extra money. You don't waste the space, and it makes it more efficient. That's Rocket Labs' model, is ride sharing for lots of different groups. That's what they do, and that's what we saw over the weekend. SpaceX is now doing this, for obviously some of their bigger missions, but on these Starlink things, launches as well. They finally opened it up to, where possible, doing ride sharing. They launched 3 satellites for Planet Labs, so for Earth observations, for looking down on the Earth.
And that is very cool. The one thing that I was just looking at here, a stat of SpaceX launches in basically the last month. They've put 2 astronauts into orbit on the first crewed Dragon launch, but they've also put 60 Starlink satellites into orbit on June 3. So this makes over 100 satellites in less than 2 weeks, which is just incredible to think of how fast SpaceX are turning these around.
That's right. They are turning them out very fast. You know, and we just talked about a few weeks ago how they're deploying the first visor on some of these Starlink satellites. So they're definitely moving quick, and hopefully the visor technology works quite effectively.
And part of the problem with that there as well, of course, is if this technology doesn't work, they've now got over 100 satellites with a bit of defunct technology on board, and the hope of reducing their luminosity doesn't quite pan out.
Exactly, that's right. So, you know, that is always one of the worries. And one of the things that we do in research and development is, you know, that's why you do lots of different testing and trying to make sure that before you're in full-scale production or discovery or science or whatever, you're not committed to something that isn't working or exactly what you want.
And our last launch in the trio was the Interstellar Technologies Momo F5 from Japan. This one's an interesting one.
Yeah, so, you know, this is a private company based in Japan, and this rocket is what we call a sounding rocket. So it doesn't go as fully as high. It goes essentially into space, technically into what we call suborbital, and usually does launch a payload or experiment. And this was more of a test for them to try and do their final test launch to see if it's all working and going according to plan, as we talked about. Unfortunately, it didn't go fully to plan for them. They were one of the more unsuccessful ones from the weekend. But, you know, I like highlighting it because we talk a lot about SpaceX and other companies. It's not just the US that has gone through this privatization. There's lots of other companies in those countries who are in the game as well.
And Interstellar Technologies, as the name suggests, this was Momo F5. So it's their 5th attempt at a launch. So they've done 4 before with mixed success. The 3rd launch in May 2019 was the first to truly succeed. But unfortunately, they regressed a little bit with the 4th that fell into the ocean after an anomaly. But this is all about learning and perfecting the technologies for the future.
That's right. You know, you have to practice. You know, when SpaceX started this as well, you know, there was lots of previous SpaceX failures. As again, I always like, go to YouTube and look up how to blow a rocket, I think, up in 60 seconds. It's a nice, cool SpaceX video of lots of their early prototypes going boom on the launch pad.
Fantastic, Brad. Well, there's going to be more of these busy weekends in the years ahead as NASA and all those private companies ramp up. Australia's ramping up. News this week that our Mission Control Centre has been, the funding for our Mission Control Centre has been allocated. So busy times ahead, plenty of rocket launches for us to cover here on Talkin Science.
That is indeed. It's going to be very busy going up there and up there.
And yes, indeed, it is only going to get busier as we ramp up the Artemis missions, the missions to Mars. Mars Perseverance is due for launch in July as well, which is going to be really, really cool. And Aussie Mission Control, the funding has been approved, and we're going to be chatting with the company looking after or building that Aussie Mission Control in the heart of Adelaide in South Australia. And that's going to be coming up in a few weeks. I'm trying to organise an Aussie Space Month with a few companies that are pioneering the Aussie space industry. So look out for that one. That one will be coming soon. But right now, we've wrapped up. It's time to wrap up Talkin Science Uncut for this week. Producing it live across YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter/Periscope. It's been fun to have your company, either live or on replay. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much for doing it. This has been Talkin Science Uncut, Australia's only science and space news podcast produced live on a Saturday, and the only Aussie science and space news podcast beaming out 4 days a week. That's what I meant to say. We are beaming out 4 days a week with Talkin Science. Thanks so much for watching, so much for listening, and we'll do it all again from Tuesday next week. I'm Matt Miller. Bye for now.